what was the final straw that ended a lifelong friendship? Story 1. When I was a freshman in college, I shared a room with my best friend from high school. I kept a diary that I wrote in every day, and I would hide it in my locked closet. One day I came back from class to find her reading out loud from my diary to a group of our friends. She had broken into the closet just to get the diary. I haven't spoken to that in 30+ years. Story 2. My best friend of over 20 years. We both had kids about the same age, and our daughters were also best friends. She left her then 15-year-old with me for a week while she went on a trip to Bali, no problem at all, and her daughter attempted to end her life. I took her to hospital, got care for her, sat by her bed for 3 days, made sure she was set up with a social worker, got her connected with a local mental health unit and youth services team, and put a plan in place to help her recover and move forward, etc., etc., etc. Obviously, ID called her mum on day 1 and kept her appraised, but this woman not only didn't change her flights and come home because it would have cost $200 to change the flights, she literally told me, "Oh, you don't have to go to the hospital every day to sit with her, that's what the nurses are for." And then when she finally got back, she flipped out at me for parenting her child behind her back. I'm still in contact with the kid. She's living independently and working as a baker's apprentice. She's gone no contact with her mother, but she still rings me up when she needs a grown-up to talk to. I will never speak to that friend again. Story 3. I felt that I was doing all the legwork. I started every conversation, was the first one to email, text, etc. So one day I decided I was going to wait for her to message first. And sure, here we are 18 years later. Story 4. Kept borrowing money for me to feed their kids or get their kids medication. It's an emergency, and truly they were destitute. These instances were plausible. But one day, after being told one of the kids had been hospitalized and released home, and between the Uber rides to and from the hospital they didn't have enough for his meds at the pharmacy, I signed on to Facebook and saw pictures of them, sick kid included, at a block party, destroyed the friendship for me. For the record, I never expected them to pay back borrowed money for food or medicine. I was happy to help. Those kids were like my kids too. It was betrayal and finding out I wasn't loved like I loved that got me. Story 5. Everything was someone else's fault, on both the macro and micro levels. If it was an interpersonal issue, it was never him at fault, ever. Relationship problems, always his partner's at fault, even when the same reasons caused each breakup. Got into a verbal altercation at the bar, someone else's fault completely. It was too exhausting. Story 6. When I realized that me being a good friend to her was actually just me being a caretaker with poor boundaries and putting up with years of emotional abuse, when that fog lifted, it was completely life-changing. Story 7. He kept having kids with different girls, then bailing on them. I just couldn't watch it anymore. I left after the third one. Pretty sure he's at 6 or 7 now. Story 8. I was diagnosed with cancer a year after moving across the country for my friends from high school. I didn't ask for them to do anything except play some online games with me while I recovered from surgery. Not one of them did. They were playing other games I could see in my various friends lists, but none of them would put aside the games they were playing to keep me company and take my mind off of things. No texts, no phone calls, nothing. The only thing I asked for was time online company, and they put in zero effort. This was the last straw in a long string of feeling like an afterthought. It's been 9 years and not a single one of them has even tried to contact me since then. Guess being an afterthought was too optimistic even. Story 9. She was a key witness to my rape trial but was too lazy to go into the police station to make a statement. She had 3 years to do it. I lost the trial, but it was close. I'll always wonder if I would have got justice if she had done it. Story 10. Found out he slept with my high school girlfriend and held that secret for 10 years. He also invited my 13-year-old sister out to drink and party with our friends. Drew the line, ended the friendship, and clocked him in the jaw for that one. I didn't learn he slept with my high school girlfriend until many years after the friendship ended, but that made a lot of things make complete sense. He was always extremely angry and ticked off at me whenever I spent time with her. He was never a friend really. Story 11. Everything was a competition that my friend had to win. The day that she noticed my brand new jug and said that hers was bigger was the day I realized that I didn't want to be friends anymore. Story 12. We were supposed to move in together. The first move away from our parents. Fortunately, we were renting from my parents, because, the night before our move-in date, he called me to say he had gotten his own apartment earlier that day without me. He then listed entirely everything about me that annoyed him and every mistake and flaw I had that he knew about. Since he was my best friend, it was a lot. There was no sign this was coming. We had only ever argued a couple of times. I never knew that so much about me was so distasteful to him. I was devastated. A couple of weeks later, he called and came over until I spoke to him. He was very apologetic. For reasons I would have completely understood had he told me. He had a breakdown and realized he needed to live on his own. Knowing it was going to mess things up for me, he made it my fault. He said he didn't mean any of it and was horrified about how he treated me, yet it was so detailed and specific, going back years to incidents that I had no idea were an issue. There was just no fixing it. I could never feel comfortable and trust him again. On one hand, I miss people I used to know. I don't miss him or think of him often or with nostalgic fondness. My daughter doesn't know who he is when she comes across old pictures of us, but she knows about other old friends, since I mention them. On the other hand, it's been 20 years. It's hard for me to have close friends still, because I feel like they may be building lists of things I do wrong and ways I just am wrong and awful, And maybe they'll call one day when I least expect it and list it all. It wasn't good. Story 13. She started routinely paying rent weeks late, and blocked me from her social media so she could secretly post about going to concerts and music festivals with her rent money. Story 14. He dated my best friend. They met because of me and she utterly trashed his heart and cheated on him. Just awful. I regret introducing them. Our friendship got ghosted during their relationship, and after they broke up, it was clearly done. Sucks, but I get it. Still miss the dude. Hope he's happier now that he got the away from everyone. Story 15. She faked dying of cancer. Edit. People are asking for the story. I have never written it down. English isn't my first language and it still upsets me deeply, so bear with me. Her name is Nina, and yeah, that's her real name, because I am done giving a, we were best friends since our teens, through our youth, our 20s. Didn't have a lot of contact in our 30s, but that mostly because of me moving for my career, yet I remained being very fond of her and still would lend her $3,000 during the pandemic to keep her business afloat in a heartbeat. Contact almost dried out after that. I pinned it to the fact that my proud friend just was too ashamed to owe me money and not being able to pay me back. 2 years later she wrote me a message out of the blue in the dead of night along the lines, "Thank you for everything you did for me. I want you to know that I will always love you." Called her immediately. She was sobbing, telling me she was dying of cancer like her mother did when we were 19, told me that she refuses to continue with chemotherapy and that it will be over in less than a year. I cried with her, offered my help, asked if it would be okay if I visited her, but she refused. The following months I would check in with her, sent her messages, pictures from back of the day, asked if I can do anything and of course eased her mind about the money she owed me still. She barely wrote back, wouldn't let me visit her, wouldn't pick up the phone. I would lie if I'd say that her behavior didn't raise some red flags with me, but hey, this is Nina, my ninny, my oldest friend, so I brushed it off, told myself I had to respect my dying friend's wishes and grieved by myself. Then about 3 months in, her ex called me. Her ex, the man she had been together with for more than 10 years and who, as she told me, threw her out on the street 2 years ago during a pandemic, which of course made me hate him and never contact him again. The first thing he did was apologizing for not calling earlier, that he needed some time to recover, then he unloaded. Nina told him 2 years prior almost the same thing she told me a few months back, that she had lung cancer and that the odds weren't in her favor. He tried to support her as good as he could. He is himself chronically ill and lives of a disability pension. He would cook for her, plant her favorite flowers in their garden, made a collage of pictures of her mom, and after they'd spend a beautiful evening together she would say things like, "You know, this might be one of our last happy nights together," totally crushing him and his spirits every time. She would pretend to have chemo on the weekend for several days at a time. He wasn't allowed to visit, was if even only allowed to accompany her to the entrance, outside of the hospital, because she needed to do this on her own. She would write him during her hospital stay, for example, that the rescue helicopters are flying like crazy today, praying emoji, and I know it sounds insane in hindsight that he didn't see through it for so long, but got it, you don't think anybody is capable of pulling something like this off, especially not a person you love and whom you believe to know wholeheartedly. Also the level of manipulation, the sheer sophistication with which she made the big lie believable through an endless stream of tiny little lies is flat out frightening, but well, everybody has to learn sometime, I guess. One weekend while she was pretending to have chemo she went silent, which was unusual since they would be messaging several times a day plus a phone call every night. He was worried sick and called the hospital in a panic, fearing for the worst, asking for Nina. Receptionist lady said she would have to check with other staff since there is nothing in her computer. She called him back after a while to let him know there was no patient with the name Nina surname at the hospital, and after a pause, "I am sorry sir, but a Nina surname hasn't been a patient in this hospital for years now. This is not a large city. There is no other hospital that does chemo not within a 2-hour drive." And it was the hospital where she would allow him to drop her off occasionally. God, that poor man. I feel like for thinking so ill of him for so long. Anyways, after the phone call he of course was still in disbelief. So he called the woman Nina shared her shop with, who also was very surprised to hear that Nina and him were still a couple and still living together, because Nina of course told her as well that they broke up, which was very believable since she had been seeing another man who rented her a tiny flat near the shop. A lawyer, a married man with 2 children, mind you, like Nina's, of a father who left her, her brother and sick mom for his affair partner back in the day. The affair with lawyer man started, you guessed it, 2 years prior. Oh, and apparently Nina had also sold her share of the shop a while back, which was also news to her ex and me as well. He confronted her when she came home on Sunday night after chemo. Turns out nope, she never had cancer. She made it up to cover up the affair. The reason he couldn't reach her the whole weekend was because she was on a trip to Italy with her lawyer man and lost her phone. And yes, she deliberately told me and other people that were close to her that had thrown her on the street, so that we wouldn't talk to each other, because we weren't supposed to know about her cancer. He of course threw her out immediately, and for real this time. It was the same night she told me she had cancer. Here's the thing, I knew every word he told me was true. I knew it in my heart. There were signs, tiny red flags, things that wouldn't add up, tons and tons of it over the course of a friendship that lasted for decades. But of course I also didn't want to believe it, so I still made my own phone calls. I called the woman Nina had her shop with, called people from back in the day and people living in the same small city that might know her, and well, turns out the woman I thought was one of my oldest, dearest friends. My tiny ninny is a deeply deranged, incredibly cruel and stone-cold psychopath that leaves a path of destruction in her wake. I don't know what went wrong. If it was her mother's death, who truly was one of the greatest, kindest, funniest women I have ever met, that triggered the sickness in Nina, or if it has always been there, lurking, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I haven't contacted Nina since her ex called me that evening. Him and I have become friends again, trying to help each other heal from her. Nina hasn't contacted me either. She probably knows what's up, I don't care. I got my closure by making sure Lawyerman's wife knows what her husband is up to. And if you by any chance are reading this, Nina, yeah, it was me. And you can keep the money if you promise me that I don't have to ever see your face again. Story 16. Best friend of 19 years tells me to go talk to a cute guy at a wedding guy, and I hit it off and start a long-distance relationship. Best friend of 19 years gives me the silent treatment for no reason for 3 weeks, including my birthday, because I told her that guy and I are doing really well. Best friend of 19 years starts talking to me again, but never explains herself and never apologizes for acting like a child. Never says she's happy that I'm happy in a new relationship, never shows any support. Best friend of 19 years, and I start hanging out again, but I keep a safe distance emotionally, because why did she get upset about me starting a relationship with someone that she told me to go talk to in the first place? After 5 years of hanging out again, found out that best friend of 19 years still talks about my relationship behind my back. That was the final straw for me. Blocked on everything, moved on, actually much less stress in my life since cutting her off. No longer best friend of 19 years. Story 17. I had supported her through a terrible breakup, canceling her wedding the morning of, with an abusive alcoholic, that could be its own separate post, and countless other personal tragedies for a decade. She has a wonderful heart but cannot get out of her own way and is completely unreceptive to any type of advice, no matter how gentle. I became worried about her as I noticed her mental health declining, and essentially had to come to Jesus with her and 2 other friends in an incredibly supportive, safe setting. She lashed out at me and said she was sick of my drama and didn't need me as a friend if I couldn't support her. I told her if by support she meant watch her spiral into yet another black hole she'll need help crawling out of. Then she was right. I said I'm always here to help you, but I can't watch this and do nothing. She never spoke to me again. It broke my heart, but after speaking to another former friend of hers with a similar experience, I realized it's just her pattern. Story 18. He yelled at me for correcting him on the pronunciation of a word, something he did to me all the time. Despite being wrong, he yelled and yelled at me. I said him done by, but not before calmly getting in one barb at him. Story 19. So stupid. He was an army vet, and a staunch proponent of freedom of speech. He believed that anyone can say whatever they want, and there should never be any repercussions of any kind for whatever anyone says. I told him the guarantee of freedom of speech in the US just meant the government can't arrest you, it doesn't mean freedom from social repercussions. He disagreed so vehemently, he blocked me and hasn't spoken to me since, thereby proving my point, ironically. Story 20. Taking an argument to the internet. They cropped one sentence of a very long message to make me look like the villain. They also did this the day after I attended my uncle's funeral. Story 21. She became very insecure and jealous when I got into law school. I came home to visit after my first semester, and we caught up over coffee. From my perspective, I had hardcore imposter syndrome. School was stressful and hard and scary, but I was learning a lot, challenging myself, and meeting nice people. She started to pull away, to no show for phone dates and to generally off. When I finally got a hold of her, she told me, "You went off to law school and suddenly thought you were better and smarter than everyone else." My jaw was on the floor. That narrative existed nowhere but in her own mind. I told her she was wrong, and that her perspective hurt my feelings. She cried and yelled, "I know him up about friendships with women. That was the last time we ever spoke," said I deserved the death penalty for getting an abortion and meant it. Story 22. Called my employer trying to get me fired over something personal between us. Idiot. She was unvaccinated and refused to take a COVID test before seeing me. My mother was terminally ill and severely immunocompromised, so I was absolutely trying to minimize the risk of getting COVID so I could still see my mum. She refused to take a test, twice, despite kind and calm requests and explanations, on the basis that she didn't want to get a sinus infection. This was in the time of nasal swabs, not mouth swabs, for COVID tests, you know, those nasal swabs that are sterile and can't cause infection. I'm 100% sure that it wasn't about a sinus infection. It was about control. She had been annoyed because I hadn't validated her anti-vax stance in the past. Similarly, I know she wanted more validation for her religious views, which she'd acquired in her 30s and which I didn't share. ID told her that I was happy her faith made her happy, but I think she wanted me to truly share her beliefs. ID also said that her sister's bisexuality was fine with me when Shed stated that a wedding of 2 women was not what God wants. I think all of those different views just threatened the way she saw the world, and how she saw herself. Her last texts thanked me for sharing my views re-COVID and its potential to kill my mum, then became pseudo-concerned when I didn't reply. I read the whole situation as I want to say whatever I want to you, but I want to still feel like a nice person, so please reply and give me that validation. I didn't reply to her, but I still ask myself whether the mature thing to do would have been to clearly reply and state that I didn't want to stay in contact. It's taken me until now, over a year later, to see through the pain and formulate what I might have said. We'd been friends since the first days of high school, 20 years. In essence, we just acquired very different views from each other as adults, but I can't pretend her attitude towards my mum, and towards the horrible journey my family had to take, wasn't devastating. Life is a painful journey at times, that's for sure. Story 23 asked why can't you date white girls after I began dating my now wife and then starting wearing that stupid ugly red mega hat. Was pretty done after that. Story 24 extremely judgmental for years, after being a pushover for so long. When I finally stood up for myself and told her that I felt hurt by her words, she told me she wasn't sorry 3 times and used weaponized therapy speak to justify her behavior. I was also going through a breakup, my cat of 10 years died, and I had one of those 1 to 2 long colds that wouldn't go away. I couldn't talk to her for a while after that, but when she finally reached out to me again, she asked what she could do to mend this relationship, other than apologizing. Literally, all I needed was an apology, and she couldn't even give me that. Story 25 She backed the woman responsible for my kid's dad's death. My ex-husband and I were great co-parents, we just weren't good as a couple. That he was with watched him have symptoms and waited until he was nonverbal and couldn't walk before calling a friend for a ride to the DR, not an ambulance. Needless to say he was airlifted and passed from a brain bleed. Could have been saved if he would have gotten proper treatment. Story 26 I'm a fairly introverted person. I don't need a lot of attention. My friend who was also a cousin was the opposite. She brought drama wherever she went and it was always about her. She was fun to be around though and it actually found it somewhat entertaining, but as we got older it started to wear on me. Then I went through something really traumatic and needed support. She couldn't offer any, there just wasn't any way she could insert herself into my crisis. So she wasn't interested, that was the last straw. She reached out every few years and I basically told her to off. The last time she messaged me, I just didn't respond, I couldn't even be bothered. Story 27 Religious rhetoric. I am no longer a religious person but by no means anti-religion. People can believe or not believe whatever they want, however, when someone starts talking about theirs being superior to another for whatever reason or trying to push their beliefs on me, I had to tune out. They also started with the God's will nonsense to explain anything and everything, made me want to no longer engage in conversation. Story 28 She told everyone I was being dramatic after my dad died. Turns out losing a parent was an inconvenience to her weekend plans. Haven't spoken since, and it's been so much more peaceful. Story 29 He went off the political deep end when Trump ran in 2016 and I ignored a lot of it. When COVID hit, he opted to post a meme reference wearing a mask during COVID as the equivalent of volunteering to get on a train to a concentration camp. This post came after a negative comment on my posting about my wife making masks for the family. I reminded him of my heritage and how the part of my family that remained in Germany never survived. His response was so what, still rings true, didn't bother responding, just removed him from social media and haven't said a word to him since. Story 30 Well, I learned that day that anything could go wrong within a sec. My best friend who was like a sister to me had her eyes on me for a long time. I was too trusting to notice it at that moment, but later on, I caught them hitting it in my room when I was away only to find out it wasn't their first time and I've been played all along. I felt so bad and traumatized. How can she be so wicked and evil? And how can he betray my love for him? I felt used. Story 31 She burst into a dinner party of people neither of us know, to make an announcement. She didn't knock on the door, the guests were seated at the table, and she loudly said that I had given her herpes. A lie. The hostess of the party, it was a gathering of her work friends, knew us both, so she told me in private. That ripped the rug out from under my feet and I went to no contact on the crazy woman. That was 40 years ago. Story 32 So I haven't ended this friendship per se, but I have stepped back from it. I grew up with my buddy, and his family wasn't the greatest. Mom was a stripper, dad wasn't too bad but a little stern, think typical boomer Gen X blue-collar father. Parents got divorced, and the home life devolved a little further. He fell in with the wrong crowd in high school, and we drifted apart a bit. I left, but would reconnect years later whenever I'd come back to town. I always made a point to try and see him. My father died in January of 24, and since this guy was like another brother to me, and another son to my father, I hoped he'd join us at the memorial. He swore he'd be there but never showed. My older brother's wife graduated with her master's in May of that same year, and I invited this guy again, gave him about a month's heads up, and reminded him a time or two leading up to it, swore he'd be there, but he never showed. I still love him like a brother but I came to realize he just wasn't in a place, mentally or emotionally, to maintain lasting adult friendships, likely stemming from all that he went through as a kid. He'll leave the ball in his court, but I wouldn't be surprised if I never heard from him again. Story 33 The straw my mom dying. Apparently, friends for decades, she ghosted me when my mom died of cancer. I talked to her about it and she said, I got the feeling you wanted space. I let her know I needed her in my life, especially now, and she said she'd do better. When I stopped being the one to initiate contact, I never heard from her again. It's been 4 years, mind you. We went through typically life items together, but also she was there for me when my dad died a decade previous. We were together through a house fire her family suffered from. We went through all major life changes together. I still love her. I hope she's doing well. Story 34 Distance. I guess, when me and my parents migrated to the UK, I started school but was unhappy in it. Then in my second year I got moved and he became my first of very few friends in that school. We were basically inseparable, until we graduated from the school 4 years later. He went to a different secondary school and we kinda lost contact. After that I tried to restore it through our parents since they were still friends, even getting his number, but no matter what I tried I just never got a reply back. Eventually, after trying for God knows what time years later, I asked myself, do I really respect myself that little to chase someone who doesn't have the decency to reply, and deleted everything related to him. Story 35. He got into a relationship, and suddenly he would only hang out with his new boyfriend's friends and drop his own. Any invitation to hang out or go to dinner was flaked on by saying he couldn't afford dinner even though I've offered to pay and have paid several times. Then a week later I see his IG story of him off to Miami with his boyfriend. But he couldn't pay for dinner, where I was excited to tell him I got engaged. Story 36. Sometimes it's a weird thing that you can't even explain. I've stopped talking to some really close friends for no reason at all, just growing apart and becoming different people that no longer click. I guess I've come to terms with the fact that some friendships just come with an expiry date. Move on, be thankful they came into your life. Next. Story 37. Couldn't be bothered to come and see my daughter who had just been born. Kept messaging me asking when we would meet up. Told him to come over, but he just kept saying he didn't know my new address, despite the last conversation and the one before including said address. Thought it, why should I have to drag my newborn to see him? Some friends are not worth it. Story 38. College buddy got sucked into the right-wing YouTube manosphere. He was always kind of but that gave you the permission structure to be an unrestrained, unapologetic, argumentative. Story 39. The guy drank the conservative Kool-Aid, started laughing at my political posts, attacking people in the comments. I tried to maintain the friendship by establishing boundaries, explained that if he didn't comment on my political posts I would maintain the same level of respect. It lasted about 3 months before he started attacking people commenting on my posts and dropping laugh emojis like confetti. I cut him loose and his reply was, "That's a bit extreme, ISN." I explained that we had agreed on boundaries that he had violated and he replied by calling me a commie and acting like a victim. That was 3 weeks ago. No regrets, never put any effort into anything, like not at school, not in personal relationships, nothing. Then he would and still always blames everyone else besides himself for his own failings. Complete lack of accountability. The final nail in coffin was when he said he wouldn't be a groomsman because my wedding was too far. I literally drove 12 hours to be one of his. Also began drinking the orange Kool-Aid for no reason whatsoever. Story 40. I was in the middle of a divorce and my childhood bestie told me that I was a Christian and that I deserved being mentally abused. Spread lies to my family saying I was on drugs and drinking wildly every night and made my life much harder during an already difficult time. A few years later she also got divorced, but it was okay because God wanted her to leave him. She has tried to reach out over the years to try to get info on my life to talk to my parents. We are technically related by marriage and cause drama. I had to delete all social media to get her to leave me alone. Story 41. Kinda had an epiphany after my current girlfriend told me he had made a pass at her after he knew we were dating. He's done the same with basically every woman I've dated, and for one reason or another at the time I'd forgive him or give him a pass because of extenuating circumstances. I don't know why, but after that last time I decided that I actually don't give a what his excuse is. Trying to actively sabotage my relationships is not something I should have to tell a friend is not cool, let alone reiterate it every time I enter a new relationship. Story 42. I overheard her laughing with her family about my fictional tragic backstory. Turned out she didn't believe me about a lot of things I had told her about my life, and was happy to discuss that fact with people. I had always thought she was one of those fundamentally decent people that you meet so few of. Turns out there are even fewer of them than I thought. Story 43. A guy I've been friends with for over 15 years has alienated me and most of our friend group. He was always an abrasive person, but we all knew he had a good heart and when the chips were down, would do anything to help. It's a group full of LGBT people, not by intent, but like attracts like. As time went by he became a libertarian and kept insisting he was far smarter than anyone else politically. He also became a massive chud, and would constantly argue with us on pointless because he considers himself a debater. It would always end with everyone else telling him to stop because he would always push it way too far, which resulted in everyone being pissed off, including him. Eventually, he gave me in particular an ultimatum, telling me that I had changed. I laid out that no, he was the problem and that we were worried about him. He refused to change. So I left, along with my wife and a few other friends, and then other friends who didn't want to be the only ones left around to manage him. Most of the time I see him sitting on Discord in our server, on voice alone. 2 of our friends go and check in on him out of loyalty and pity. Like I said, he helped us out a lot in the past, but it's clear everyone is now much happier without his influence. It sucks, it really does. I mourn the person I knew before he changed, the man of reason and rationality he thinks he still is. Story 44. One of the smartest guys I know, talented in almost everything he did, just naturally, and I grew up so jealous of him. Late 90s and he discovered speed and ecstasy, and through years of abuse it changed him, even down to his face. When he was on his face would sag, and slowly but surely the droopy saggy face became his only face. Final straw was finding out he had sold some of my things he had borrowed, then lied about it, blaming others. I miss him a lot, but the guy I miss is gone now. Story 45. Had a very good friend go into the US Navy because he needed to finish college. Not sure who came back for years later, but that guy was a Christian, a bigot, wanted all kinds of wars. RIP dude. Story 46. We were friends since elementary. He was dating a girl from middle school all the way past college. I had planned a huge road trip with all our childhood friend group. Took like 6 months to get everything and everyone on board. Friend and his GF broke up over some dumb SH. Friend told us he can't make the trip because it was hard on him. We all cancelled and stayed in town for solidarity for him, offered to hang out, spend time, be there for him. He apparently had another friend group he'd known for a couple months, and took the same road trip with that group, left on my birthday after saying he couldn't make it to celebratory lunch with us. Shortly after, everyone in the group dropped him after that, but I was the first to make it clear I have no association with him anymore. Story 47. My best friend lying to a dude that she was infertile and immediately got pregnant. Immediately, like it had to have been the day that they met, based on when the doctors predicted she got pregnant. She'd done this twice before with 2 other dudes. At this point, it's a pattern. She spent years convincing everyone that she was disabled, so she doesn't work, which is fine to be disabled. I'm not trying to throw any shade at disabled people, but she continued to trap men with babies that she couldn't financially provide for. And since her disability is a mental disability, she wasn't providing a stable mental environment for the children. When she chose to keep the last child, I blew up that friendship so quickly, because I could not watch another child be the victim of her.